Iceland is a stable democracy with a high standard of living, and until recently, extremely low unemployment and government debt.
We had the complete infrastructure of a modern society. Clean energy, food production, fisheries, with a quota system to manage them.
Good health care, good education, clean air, not much crime. It's a good place for families to live.
We had almost end of history status.
But in 2000, Iceland's government began a broad policy of deregulation that would have disastrous consequences. First for the environment, and then for the economy. They started by allowing multinational corporations like Alcoa to build giant aluminum smelting plants and exploit Iceland's natural geothermal and hydroelectric energy sources.
Many of the most beautiful areas in the highlands with the most spectacular colors are geothermal. So nothing comes without consequence.
At the same time, the government privatized Iceland's 3 largest banks. The result was one of the purest experiments in financial deregulation ever conducted.
Finance took over and more or less wrecked the place.
In a 5-year period, these 3 tiny banks, which had never operated outside of Iceland, borrowed $120 billion, 10 times the size of Iceland's economy. The bankers showered money on themselves, each other, and their friends.
There was a massive bubble. Stock prices went up by a factor of 9. House prices more than doubled.
Iceland's bubble gave rise to people like Jan Asgeir Jóhannesson. He borrowed billions from the banks to buy up high-end retail businesses in London. He also bought a pinstriped private jet, a $40 million yacht, and a Manhattan penthouse.
Newspapers always had the headline, "This millionaire bought this company," in the UK or in Finland or in France or wherever, instead of saying this millionaire took $1 billion loan to buy this company and he took it from your local bank.
The banks set up money market funds, and the banks advised deposit holders to withdraw money and put them in the money market funds. The Ponzi scheme needed everything it could.
American accounting firms like KPMG audited the Icelandic banks and investment firms and found nothing wrong. And American credit rating agencies said Iceland was wonderful.
In February 2007, the rating agency decided to upgrade the banks to the highest possible rate, AAA.
It went so far as the government here traveling with the bankers as a PR show.
When Iceland's banks collapsed at the end of 2008, unemployment tripled in 6 months.
There is nobody unaffected in Iceland.
So a lot of people here lost their savings.
Yes, that's the case.
The government regulators who should have been protecting the citizens of Iceland had done nothing.
You have 2 lawyers from the regulator going down to a bank to talk about some issue. When they approached the bank, they would see 19 SUVs outside the bank, right? So you enter the bank and you have the 19 lawyers sitting in front of you, right? Very, very well prepared, ready to kill any argument you make. And then if you do really well, they'll offer you a job, right?
1/3 of Iceland's financial regulators went to work for the banks.
But this is a universal problem. In New York, you have the same problem, right?
I'm on my way, I'm making it. I've got to make it show, yeah. So much larger than life. I'm gonna watch it grow with it.
What do you think of Wall Street incomes these days?
Excessive.
I've been told it's extremely difficult for the IMF to criticize the United States.
I won't say that.
We deeply regret our breaches of US law.
It's a small town.
They're amazed at how much cocaine these Wall Streeters can use and get up and go to work the next day.
I didn't know what credit default swaps are. I'm a little bit old-fashioned.
I'll be stretching my mouth to let those be.
Has Larry Summers ever expressed remorse?
I don't hear confessions.
I'm running enough. I'm getting out to the city, big, big city. I'll be a big noise with all the big boys so much.
The government's just writing checks. That's Plan A, that's Plan B, and that's Plan C.
Would you support legal controls on executive pay?
I would not.
Are you comfortable with the level of compensation in the financial services industry?
If they've earned it, then yes, I am.
Do you think they've earned it?
I think they've earned it. And so you've helped these people blow the world up.
Oh, you could say that.
So much larger than life. I'm gonna watch it grow.
They were having massive private gains at public loss.
When you start thinking that you can create something out of nothing, it's very difficult to resist.
My parties have all the big names, and I greet them with the widest smile. Tell them how my life is one big invention, and always around.
I'm concerned that a lot of people want to go back to the old way, the way they were operating prior to the crisis.
I had it made like a mountain range with a snow white pillow for my big fat head.
I was getting a lot of anonymous emails from bankers saying, you can't quote me, but I'm really concerned.
Why do you think there isn't a more systematic investigation being undertaken?
Because then you'll find the culprits.
Do you think that Columbia Business School has any significant conflict of interest problem?
I don't see that we do.
The regulators didn't do their job. They had the power to do every case that I made when I was state attorney general. They just didn't want to.
Lehman Brothers, one of the most venerable and biggest investment banks, was forced to declare itself bankrupt. Another, Merrill Lynch, was forced to sell itself. Today, crisis talks are underway.
World financial markets are way down today following dramatic developments.
目前雷曼兄弟已经进入了破产清算程序，著名的会计事务所普华。
Crise, panique. La presse française annonce clairement la couleur.
In September 2008, the bankruptcy of the U.S. investment bank Lehman Brothers and the collapse of the world's largest insurance company, AIG, triggered a global financial crisis.
Fears gripped markets overnight with Asian stocks slammed.
Stocks fell off a cliff, the largest single-point drop in history.
Share prices continued to tumble in the aftermath of the Lehman collapse.
The result was a global recession, which cost the world tens of trillions of dollars, rendered 30 million people unemployed, and doubled the national debt of the United States.
If you look at the cost of it, destruction of equity wealth, of housing wealth, the destruction of income, of jobs, 15 million people globally could end up below the poverty line again. This is just a hugely expensive crisis.
This crisis was not an accident. It was caused by an out-of-control industry. Since the 1980s, the rise of the U.S. financial sector has led to a series of increasingly severe financial crises. Each crisis has caused more damage, while the industry has made more and more money. After the Great Depression, the United States had 40 years of economic growth without a single financial crisis. The financial industry was tightly regulated. Most regular banks were local businesses, and they were prohibited from speculating with depositors' savings. Investment banks, which handled stock and bond trading, were small private partnerships.
In the traditional investment banking partnership model, the partners put the money up. And obviously, the partners watched that money very carefully. They wanted to live well, but they didn't want to bet the ranch on anything.
Paul Volcker served in the Treasury Department and was chairman of the Federal Reserve from 1979 to 1987. Before going into government, he was a financial economist at Chase Manhattan Bank.
When I left Chase to go in the Treasury in 1969, I think my income was in the neighborhood of $45,000 a year.
$45,000 a year.
Morgan Stanley in 1972 had approximately 110 total personnel, one office, and capital of $12 million. Now, Morgan Stanley has 50,000 workers and has capital of several billion and has offices all over the world.
In the 1980s, the financial industry exploded. The investment banks went public, giving them huge amounts of stockholder money. People on Wall Street started getting rich.
I had a friend who was a bond trader at Merrill Lynch in the 1970s. He had a job as a train conductor at night because he had 3 kids and couldn't support them on what a bond trader made. By 1986, he was making millions of dollars and thought it was because he was smart.
The highest order of business before the nation is to restore our economic prosperity.
In 1981, President Ronald Reagan chose as Treasury Secretary the CEO of the investment bank Merrill Lynch, Donald Regan.
Wall Street and the president do see eye to eye. I've talked to many leaders of Wall Street. They all say we're behind the president 100%.
The Reagan administration, supported by economists and financial lobbyists, started a 30-year period of financial deregulation. In 1982, the Reagan administration deregulated savings and loan companies, allowing them to make risky investments with their depositors' money. By the end of the decade, hundreds of savings and loan companies had failed. This crisis cost taxpayers $124 billion and cost many people their life savings.
It may be the biggest bank heist in our history.
Thousands of savings and loan executives went to jail for looting their companies. One of the most extreme cases was Charles Keating.
Mr. Keating, you got a word?
In 1985, when federal regulators began investigating him, Keating hired an economist named Alan Greenspan. In this letter to regulators, Greenspan praised Keating's sound business plans and expertise and said he saw no risk in allowing Keating to invest his customers' money. Keating reportedly paid Greenspan $40,000. Charles Keating went to prison shortly afterwards. As for Alan Greenspan, President Reagan appointed him chairman of America's central bank, the Federal Reserve. Greenspan was reappointed by Presidents Clinton and George W. Bush. During the Clinton administration, deregulation continued under Greenspan, and Treasury Secretaries Robert Rubin, the former CEO of the investment bank Goldman Sachs, and Larry Summers, a Harvard economics professor.
The financial sector, Wall Street being powerful, having lobbies, having lots of money, step by step captured the political system, both on the Democratic and the Republican side.
By the late 1990s, the financial sector had consolidated into a few gigantic firms, each of them so large that their failure could threaten the whole system. And the Clinton administration helped them grow even larger. In 1998, Citicorp and Travelers merged to form Citigroup, the largest financial services company in the world. The merger violated the Glass-Steagall Act, a law passed after the Great Depression, which prevented banks with consumer deposits from engaging in risky investment banking activities.
It was illegal to acquire Travelers. Greenspan said nothing. The Federal Reserve gave him an exemption for a year, and then they got the law passed.
In 1999, at the urging of Summers and Rubin, Congress passed the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, known to some as the Citigroup Relief Act. It overturned Glass-Steagall and cleared the way for future mergers.
Why do you have big banks? Well, because banks like monopoly power, because banks like lobbying power, because banks know that when they're too big, they will be bailed.
Markets are inherently unstable, or at least potentially unstable. And appropriate metaphor is the oil tankers. They're very big, and therefore you have to put in compartments to prevent the sloshing around of oil from capsizing the boat. The design of the boat has to take that into account. And after the Depression, the regulations actually introduced these very watertight compartments. And deregulation has led to the end of compartmentalization.
The next crisis came at the end of the 90s. The investment banks fueled a massive bubble in internet stocks, which was followed by a crash in 2001 that caused $5 trillion in investment losses. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the federal agency which had been created during the Depression to regulate investment banking, had done nothing.
In the absence of meaningful federal action, and there has been none, and given the clear failure of self-regulation, it has become necessary for others to step in and adopt the protections needed.
Eliot Spitzer's investigation revealed that the investment banks had promoted internet companies they knew would fail. Stock analysts were being paid based on how much business they brought in, and what they said publicly was quite different from what they said privately.
InfoSpace, given the highest possible rating, dismissed by an analyst as a piece of junk. Excite, also highly rated, called such a piece of crap.
The defense that was proffered by many of the investment banks was not, you're wrong. It was, everybody's doing it and everybody knows it's going on, and therefore nobody should rely on these analysts anyway.
In December 2002, 10 investment banks settled the case for a total of $1.4 billion and promised to change their ways. Scott Talbot is the chief lobbyist for the Financial Services Roundtable, one of the most powerful groups in Washington, which represents nearly all of the world's largest financial companies.
Are you comfortable with the fact that several of your member companies have engaged in large-scale criminal activity?
You'll have to be specific.
Okay.
First of all, criminal activity shouldn't be accepted, period.
Since deregulation began, the world's biggest financial firms have been caught laundering money, defrauding customers, and cooking their books again and again and again.